Hi guys, it's Zucker, and I'm back to talk to you about some more interesting components of rhythm changes that we didn't get to in the last lesson. So as you know, rhythm changes starts out with a couple turnarounds on top. So that's B flat, G7, C minor 7, F7, and then a 3, 6, 2, 5, so that would be D minor, G7, C minor 7, F7. Now, a couple aspects of this that we haven't talked a lot about are whether you play minor sevens or dominant sevens, and sometimes substitute one for the other, and they're relatively interchangeable. So I can play B flat, G7, C7, F7, and then I can play D7, G7, C7, F7. But I can also add another dominant chord instead of the F7 at the end of bar 2. So if I take B flat, G7, C7, A7, that leads to the D7 or D minor, whatever you please. D7, G7, C, F. And I can preface that 5 chord with the 5 chord of itself. So I can do something like this. B flat, G7, E7, to A7, to D7, G7, C7, F7. And I can take the 5 chord of the E. So I can take B flat, B, E, A, D, G, C, F. And for the very last one, I can take the 5 chord of the B. And so I can start the thing off, instead of starting it off on a B flat 7, I'll start it off in an F sharp 7. And so, again, it's something that's very common, and it's so common that when people improvise over it, you'll hear the rhythm players catch it right away and start playing. Those are called cycle changes. And I used to think that those cycle changes were post-bop, but there was a saxophonist during Bird's time, maybe in the late 40s, that somebody hipped me to, who was using that cycle change with the F sharp, the B, E, A, D, G, C, F. They were using those changes back in the late 40s. And I think Art Tatum used those changes too. I never really heard Bird do that set of changes. I've heard Bird start with the E7, so he'd play, B flat to G7, E7, A7, D, G, C, F. And of course, Bird was famous for using that A7. He used the A7 all over the place instead of the 2 chord, especially when it was in a situation like rhythm changes where it was going to some type of either the B flat, so the A7 would lead basically back up to the B flat, or lead it to a 3 chord, and sometimes the 3 chord would just be the B flat, but with the D in the bass. So he would do things like, which is a C minor lick, and then he would play, instead of an F7, he'd play a lick over an A7, like a sort of a B flat diminished, back to the B flat. And then, of course, in rhythm changes, he would play something like this. He'd play over the B flat to the G7, and of course hitting those juicy B natural, which is the 3rd of the G7, and the A flat, which is a flat 9. And then he would play something over the E, so this would be, E half diminished maybe, A7, then to D, G, C, F. So it's all really interesting, and you have to realize that those chord changes are extremely flexible. They're not something that you agree upon beforehand. Jazz players have heard those and played those so many times that when they hear somebody playing the cycle, like for example, if you're playing that B flat instead of playing, which is one of the turnarounds I showed you in the first lesson, you'll hear guys actually use something like this. They'll start it right on the F sharp, going through the cycle. and then that's back to the B flat. That's when the B flat is starting to transition over to the 4 chord, which we'll go into in the next lesson. So I hope this was interesting to you. It was interesting to me to learn all this stuff for a long time. I couldn't figure out why Bird could play that A7 chord instead of the F7, but that's what he was thinking of. He was thinking of leading the A7 up to the D minor or to the B flat over D. So take it easy and work on this stuff. Hit me up if you have any questions. It's always good to shoot the breeze with you guys, and I learn as much from this as you do. Take care.